And live. So, hi everyone. We are improvising here a great deal just because, as always, when we're live, we do hit some technical difficulties. But nevertheless, here we are with our program chair, Reza Rahman, and we are going to take advantage for the next 20-ish minutes to ask questions and do clarifications for people out there. So please take advantage of this opportunity and ask any questions you may have. And Reza, if you want to raise something with us and give us heads up to any of your thoughts, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I think let's do that. I don't have. I'm trying this on my phone. I'm having some kind of issue that I'm going to sort out before my next session. But I think I'm going to give people a little bit of time to think about their questions. Servlet 4 is enormously important. If there is one API that is important for Jakarta E8, this one is it. So please, and I know, we had some technical difficulties with Ed's session, and I very much apologize for that. We'll definitely get that sorted out, and you'll be able to see the right video on YouTube on the recording. So please do gather your thoughts on what kind of questions you would like to ask me. And Tanya, if you can do me a favor and just relay those questions to me, and I will answer them.
Yes.
But before I do that, I would like to share some thoughts with the audience, and maybe this will help us jog all of our thoughts as well. So one of the issues with any vendor specification or body of work, even if it's proprietary work or open source work, is that vendors need feedback, right? So they are people as well, just like you and me, you and I maybe work on enterprise projects, and you know how thankless that is. It's the same for vendors. These are, at the end of the day, just normal human beings with their emotions and motivations and so on. So the way to get things done and the way to motivate a lot of these vendors is speaking to them as your valued vendor, right? The person that provides you these useful services that you build all these useful applications on top of, and talk to them about what is it that your needs are. So believe me, servlet is anything but done. So let me spend a little bit of time sharing sort of my ideas on what I see servlet going, and in general the servlet layer going. So let's start with just the servlet layer itself as a bit of functionality, and let's forget about the API for a second. So the servlet model is built on synchronous request response. This is a very old model. It's a proven model that we've had since, in fact, the early 80s. But the one model that is sort of challenging that entire notion is non-blocking I/O. So these sorts of changes need to happen bottom up, starting from the servlet layer. So if Java EE is to remain relevant, we need to address these things. So there's a couple of different ways of addressing it. You can either address it by creating a new specification, or you can re-engineer the servlet specification to become reactive and to become non-blocking. So that's a very broad swath of a very large body of work that needs to be done in the servlet space. But beyond that, let's assume for a second that we don't go the reactive way and we just stick with servlet the way it is. Even then, there's work to be done, right? So I think Ed touched upon reactive I/O, right? So this is basically where the client and the server negotiate what the rate of exchange is. At what rate can the server push down information down to the client? And these are things that can take advantage of, for example, work that's being done in the microprofile reactive streams API. Right? So all of these servlet underlying I/O APIs can change to just do content rate negotiation, right? Without fundamentally changing the nature of thread handling or APIs, fundamental APIs on servlet. I don't know how many of you guys know, but beyond HTTP2, it's not an RFC yet, but work has already started on HTTP 3, right? So we need to keep an eye on that as an industry, and sooner or later, essentially re-engineer the servlet spec and do a rev of the existing API to absorb these changes in HTTP 3. Right? So these are all important protocol layer changes that we need to enable server-side developers to take advantage of these features. So these are just some of the things, Ed already talked about ALPN support done properly in the servlet API, independent of whatever is in the JDK. So these sorts of things don't, as Ed mentioned, right now these are not necessarily things that the servlet vendors are motivated to do, and the motivation needs to come from you. It can't always be people like me that go and talk to these vendors and say, hey, well, what about this? Why don't you do this? Ultimately, they don't want to hear from people like me, right? Because they see me as pretty much one of them, rather than the way they look at you, which is their customers. Right? So they need to hear from you on these things. You need to ask these questions, and you need to engage them in dialogue, and assure them that these are things that matter to you and things that you would like to get done. And Java EE in this entire specification, moving from the JCP into the Eclipse Foundation, that's fundamentally what this objective is all about. This is your opportunity to engage these vendors in a way that maybe you weren't able to do in the past. So I've been talking for a little while. I don't know how much time I have left. I hope my ramblings are somewhat useful. I'm going to stop now and hope that there were some questions which I cannot see. I'll let
Yep.
Tanya read those, and I'll try and answer them.
Yes. So there is a first question. What do you see happening with Eclipse GlassFish going forward?
This is an interesting question. So I think what is going to happen with the Eclipse GlassFish going forward is some of the investment is going to come from Oracle. They have an interest in not putting in development features directly into WebLogic. That's never been the WebLogic team's preferred way of doing things. So I believe some of the investment into Eclipse GlassFish will continue to come from Oracle by virtue of the fact that they will treat GlassFish as sort of a laboratory, innovation laboratory for the work that they'll be continuing to be doing moving forward in Jakarta. And of course, this is provided that Oracle continues to be a significant player, which on the surface they said they will do that, and I have no reason to not believe that. In addition to that, I believe in order to keep GlassFish alive, there will have to be some investment from the Payara folks. So they will need to invest a bit more than what they have traditionally. So they've been, I think, some the investment that comes from Oracle. So I believe they will need to step up their game, and maybe the delta between Payara and GlassFish becomes smaller than it has been today. And finally, it's you, the community, right? So if you're going to contribute to something, please consider contributing to GlassFish. Nobody really owns it; it's an orphan, right? So why not help the orphan instead of helping the implementations that have multi-billion-dollar revenue streams behind them? Those implementations don't really need your help, right? The implementation that needs your help is the small guys like Tommy E and Payara and GlassFish.
So what are plans to phase out EJB with CDI?
So we've had this on the table for a long time. People like me, Adam, Arjan, we've been proposing API after API since EE6. So all of the ways of how we do it is already well understood. Basically, the approach is as a first step, taking out those services that are currently defined in EJB and creating hopefully better APIs that are CDI replacements, CDI services replacements of each of those APIs in a piecemeal fashion. A majority of that is going to go into EE concurrency, according to our ideas that we've had for a number of years now. And once we've done that, then we can talk about the ideas that Adam has, which is to create stereotypes that would be roughly the equivalent of what EJB is today. And then the final step would be to prune, declare EJB to be pruned, and then finally to deprecate EJB altogether. So I imagine this is going to take, if I was to estimate, we're talking about a 2-year time horizon. So if you're using EJB today, I don't think there's a reason to panic. I think you need to embrace the future and look at the ideas that we've proposed and bring your own ideas and give us feedback on what we've gotten wrong, what we've gotten right in these draft ideas that we've talked about for some period of time. And then you have time to adapt, right? So it's not like anyone is pulling the EJB rug from under your feet. It's more about evolving the platform going forward.
Thanks. So next one, what do you think about the proposal to create a CDI version of servlets, where a new style servlet would be a full CDI bean supporting interceptors, scopes, and etc.?
I'll be honest, it sounds compelling in theory. I am not fully convinced that it is worth the investment at this point. The problem is, I believe there are other more compelling things that could be done in servlets. Some of the things that I already talked about, right? So HTTP3 support, fixing ELPN, potentially doing the rate negotiation API through streams in NIO streams, rewriting servlet, or maybe coming up with a replacement to servlet in some kind of non-blocking thread APIs. I believe these are much more important than necessarily what ultimately will boil down to CDI alignment. I don't know how many people are using the CDI programming model at the servlet layer. In fact, I don't even know how many people are using the servlet API plain these days. I think James Gosling is an exception. Most of us do not program in servlet. So me personally, I'm an opinionated guy. Maybe sometimes not for the best, but in my opinionated mind, I don't see CDI alignment of servlet being a very high priority, given all of the other things that I believe need to be done with servlet first.
Okay, so I'll just read the next question. How important do you feel it is to clean up and/or replace older APIs in an effort to advance Jakarta EE? Should this type of work be done in the short term or later down the road?
So again, I'll give you my opinionated take on this, right? So we've had a platform that has basically stagnated for 2 years, right? So cleanup, we've had that cleanup problem for 10 years now. For those of us who are watching it, all the people that will tell you, this needs to be cleaned up, that needs to be cleaned up. Well, that stuff has been around for almost 10 years now, right? So you have to evaluate what's important, right? I believe the cleanup stuff can wait until we prove from a business standpoint what is the value proposition of Jakarta EE. And in order to do that, you need new features first, right? So you need to show people useful things that they can do with this platform already, right? And not focus so much on cleaning up house, so on. There will be time for cleaning up house. House priority right now. If we do that, we'll lose too much time. By the time we may not be relevant anymore that we've cleaned up house.
You see. So moving to next question, do you think something like Nettie will be added to the servlet after version 2.0, or do you think servlet will stay synchronous and blocking?
This is and I can talk the talk in terms of servlet. It's difficult for me to walk the walk at the end of the day. My layman's view is that the servlet API can be refactored to make it in IO, because a lot of these APIs, fundamentally, things like request, response, the fundamental servlet API, I think these are the right paradigms to begin with. I don't think the paradigms change very much. I think you can refactor these APIs to absorb a non-blocking thread model. But to be honest, when I talk to them, they tell me I'm an idiot, right? So they're telling me this is not the right way of thinking, right? And they may be right. They may be correct in thinking, you need a full rewrite that has nothing to do with servlet at all, and it's a brand new technology. I do not know enough to give you an intelligent answer. I think it's best to trust the experts and work with the experts when they have the appetite to do this work, and evaluate at that point in time whether what these folks are proposing makes sense, or whether they're simply reinventing the wheel for the sake of reinventing the wheel. And if they are doing that, then as an end user, you can give them that feedback then to say, hey, why are you reinventing the wheel? Right? These are paradigms we've seen already. Why can't we just use the servlet APIs instead of inventing a new thing?
The next one is, will JakartaOne participate in the serverless world like AWS Lambdas?
Yes and no. So again, I'll give you my honest answer. The problem is where serverless is really relevant is with cloud vendors, myself included, Azure included, AWS included, Google included. They have reasons not to write APIs that are very, very bound to JakartaOne, right? So at the end of the day, they need to serve a broader market than simply Java developers, right? So serverless platforms need to be language agnostic. That is a de facto reason why these APIs, it's a very tough sell for a cloud provider to standardize the serverless APIs on something like JakartaOne, because effectively you're creating a variant that has nothing to do with the rest of the APIs that you'll be supplying your other customers other than Java customers. So what I believe is relevant is something like Quarkus. So basically something that allows you to still use Java EE APIs on top of these, if you will, proprietary serverless platforms, but does it in a way that works in serverless, right? So in serverless, the biggest problem is shutdown and startup and teardown. So you need that to be super fast in a serverless environment. So I think that's what that's what the real answer, practical answer there is. Now, that is not to say something like Eclipse GMO is not relevant, right? So that's an effort where it is taking JakartaOne APIs and creating a serverless API on top of it that's supposed to be running on cloud providers' infrastructure. But again, from a practical standpoint, let me tell you, in serverless, you need like optimization, optimization, optimization. It's much easier to have a proprietary API and optimize a proprietary API in proprietary ways, and that's very difficult to do for somebody else that's outside of that cloud provider. So maybe it's not the right answer that we want to hear about, but maybe this is the practical answer for now. So I would say serverless in JakartaOne, something like Quarkus, maybe is the right answer for the foreseeable future.
So we have only a couple of minutes, and there are a couple of more questions, so I will be fast. Are there any changes, enhancements planned for JSP?
Not that I know of. If you have ideas in mind, please share them. I don't. I haven't used JSP in ages. I'm a JSF guy. I've moved along a long time ago, but that doesn't mean there aren't things in JSP.
Which functionality beside EJBs do you think would be a candidate to be pruned next?
That's a really tough one. So Corba interoperability is one. Some of the obscure things that are kind of being superseded by JakartaOne security, like Jack and Jazz, those would be good candidates. I personally have a really hard time saying with confidence that this particular technology X from Java EE should be pruned, because we've been doing that for a while, right? So we started this work in Java EE 6 12 years ago, right? So we already have done a lot of pruning. So for me personally, it's a tough question to answer. Maybe for some other people it's easier. It's tough for me.
So let me squeeze one more, and then we'll have to move to next session. Jakarta REST is officially not based on servlets. Do you think it should be, so people don't have to avoid using servlet APIs in REST? Or should a common smaller API be split off from servlet and used by both servlet and Jakarta REST?
So I'll tell you the little bit of the dynamics behind this, okay? So the problem is that the REST implementers have their own ideas of what they want to do at the fundamental protocol layer, right? So a lot of them are based on Nettie, a lot of them are based on even something like Grizzly, and they have good reasons to be doing that. So they have good reasons to decouple themselves from servlet engines. So I think it's best to trust the judgment of these people. I mean, Jaxaris is a pretty successful API. It's probably a mistake to try to tell these people, no, you shouldn't be doing what you want to be doing, and you must use a servlet engine under the hood. I think we have bigger problems to worry about in Jakarta than this, than forcing Jaxaris vendors to implement things a certain way.
Okay, so we're at the top of the hour. I will meet you all in the next session. Reza, this was great. Thank you so much. And you will be pulled into the next session with David Blevins. Thank you so much, and see you there.
Very good. Thank you.